the truth is the number one stopper. They say you think, but you never want to speak up. They say you're hiding there, you're busy, but what's on your mind, kid? What's on your mind, kid? They say out loud, never.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for episode number 45 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. My name is Mark. I am joined today by my co-hosts, as always, Neelan and Kellen.
What are you wearing, dude?
What am I wearing?
Yeah.
Basketball shorts. I'm athletic. This is what athletic people wear. Basketball shorts and t-shirt.
Did you just come from the gym?
No, but I'm always ready to go to a gym or come from
at
a gym.
any time.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I just
Yeah.
got to be prepared. So,
Yeah.
So for today's episode, we had so many questions come in from the last one that we decided to run it back. So we're going to do another.
This is amazing because we don't even have to come up with topics.
Right.
We just have to live react to
Why
things.
did we not come up with this scheme earlier?
Yeah,
in
instead
the
of,
episode,
instead
right?
of stressing out about
Yeah.
topics every episode, we just
Spent
crowdsource it.
so long trying to be philosophical and poignant, we could just have you guys send all the poignancy.
It worked for Uber, and it's working
That's
for us
true.
now.
Yeah.
Crowdsourcing. You ever heard of crowdsourcing, Kellen?
Except you guys are not employees, nor are you contractors of Board Game Barrage. But you may be able to become an intern if you're willing to be player number 4.
Right, and carry our mics, right? Is that what we
Yep,
agreed on?
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I do. Carry the mics.
So send your applications to Kellen. He'll sift through them. So we are going to dive into your questions. But before that, we are going to do what we usually do, which is talk about games we have played.
But only games that we have played this past week.
Right.
Specifically
this
Yeah.
past week. So this past week, I played the follow-up to the game I played last week, which was Brass Lancashire. I played Brass Birmingham.
Do you not remember me complaining about us wanting to play Brass? And
Yeah.
so
and then
you left.
after that, you left that podcast.
Right.
Decided
Disregarded everything you said.
play
Well, I mean-
it again without us.
I mean, did you guys not realize I disregard everything you say as soon as I leave? I sort of feel bad. But no, yeah. I immediately, as soon as I stepped out the door, blank slate, and tried to find anybody else to play this with.
And so this is Brass 2?
Yes, basically. But for all intents and purposes, this is Brass 2. So, if you're a fan of Brass Lancashire, you're going to love this game. That's the long and short of it. Introduces a couple new mechanics. There's a beer mechanic, so it's a third currency to go with coal and iron. I mean, there's no reason in expounding on this. If you listen to my review of Brass, or if you know Brass, or if you think you're going to like Brass, then you're going to like Brass Birmingham. I guess one interesting thing is I don't think you need both in your collection, but I think they're different enough games that you could definitely have them in your collection. That was one fear I had when I backed both games on Kickstarter was, am I just buying a game and its improved version? And that's not the case. They are two separate games. They share a lot of DNA and a lot of mechanics, but there's enough difference in there that I don't feel like redundant. I feel like I would enjoy playing the Birmingham version and I'm playing the Lancashire version. And because I've played Birmingham now, I don't feel at all that I would never go back to Lancashire.
Interesting.
Like, it's a whole different game.
You haven't said this specifically, and it makes me think maybe I'm just misinformed, but is Birmingham like a slightly streamlined version of Lancashire, or not really?
So that's what it was, I think, touted as, and it is in a lot of ways. However, I mean, streamline is sort of a misnomer. Like, you're not going to get from a hour and a half, 2 hour game of the original Brass.
Right.
This is not
It's not
suddenly a
something like-
60-minute
yeah,
game.
yeah,
No.
okay, sure.
You know, you might be shaving 10 minutes per player, something. But don't go to this for the streamlinedness. Go for it because you like Brass, and you basically want a... Variant is not strong enough a word because it's a whole different game. But if you like Brass and you want a game like Brass, get Brass Birmingham.
Did you take nothing away from when I chastised you for your collection 2 weeks ago?
What was the specific criticism? Because, again, I forgot everything you said as soon as I left the recording.
I've had many people reach out to me and say that they have whittled down parts of their collection in no small part due to our talk on collections. And you acquired the same game, but a
Twice.
variant version of it that is clearly a different game.
Yeah, so
And your advice is you must own both.
my advice was explicitly not that.
Okay, sorry.
My advice was you don't have to have both, but you can have both.
Mark, on the spot, right now, which
Yes.
one would you keep? Your house is burning, you have to grab one.
He doesn't have a house.
Sorry,
That's right.
your gymnasium is burning. You have to grab one.
I would probably stick with Brass Birmingham. Yeah.
OG?
No, that's not OG. You're not paying attention to anything I'm saying. That is NG.
Oh, that's the new one.
The new one, yes.
2.0.
2.0. But seriously, if Brass Birmingham burned in that gymnasium fire, that tragic gymnasium fire, started by friction of basketballs, I guess, bouncing together, I don't know, I would be happy with having Brass Lancashire. They're both just fantastic games. They're both incredibly solid games. So, yeah.
Cool.
Does this game, too, also have the Splendor quality poker chips?
They do. Both games have the same sort of artistic aesthetic, and they both are produced to the nines. So,
But they're completely different games, right?
But they're completely different games.
But they look the same. They have the same components. And
Same mechanisms.
Huh.
But they are different games.
Really?
They are different games.
Well, you've certainly convinced me, Mark.
Neelan, did you play anything?
I could talk about 2 games real quick that I played this past week. One was Exodus Paris Nouveau. We spoke about this on our Gen Con episode, having only played it on the show floor. Did you? You didn't play this?
I did not play this. I haven't played this at all.
I'm sad that we didn't get you into that game, Mark, because I remember even speaking at Gen Con that we would want to try this again with you. This is an indie boards and cards game set in the Resistance dystopian universe. And it's designed by Martin Wallace, unusual for a social deduction game. And the premise is you're split into 2 teams, but unlike the Resistance or Secret Hitler, you don't know who's on your team at the outset. The mechanic revolves around voting in a leader. The leader has some sort of card selection that is handed to them by people around the table. The leader is also choosing what's called the tail end Charlie that will also put a card into the row for the bad team. And the balance of resources on these cards, whether that's victory points at the end of the game or distance, is going to determine the outcome of the game at the end. So you're just basically playing cards to either pile in order to either get further ahead as the runners, if that's the right word for them, or trying to catch up to the good team as the hunters, or if the game lasts a full 7 rounds to have more victory points than the other team. If a player dies, the game is over and that team loses. So there are a bunch of different ways the game can end, but it's all in service of the same mechanic in that you're sort of drawing a card, lying about it ostensibly, playing into a pile, trying to figure out who's on your team, that sort of thing. I got a pretty good, strong impression of this since Gen Con. It's still such a quick game that's fairly easy to teach, that feels pretty different from your usual social deduction fare. Yeah, I liked it. What do you think, Helen?
I think that it won't change your mind about social deduction.
I think that's
certainly.
true, yeah.
But in the realm of making you feel a little less tense than the Resistance, I think this works really well.
Yeah.
Because the good guys and the bad guys, it's not so much like 2 hidden bad guys, more as half the people at the table on your team and half the people are against you. And it's more about figuring that out.
Right. One of the things that comes along with most social deduction games is this feeling that you're letting down the team because you know who your teammates are. There's less of that to this. You're doing what's best for your team in a given moment, and then also sort of trying to figure out what's happening around the table without it feeling like this, like you said, like this intense pressure at all times.
It's the best Martin Wallace game that we've talked about so far.
Oh yeah, that's actually true. Two Martin Wallace games.
I haven't played this, but I would let this burn in the gymnasium. But kidding aside, so I haven't played this, but from your description, it does sound a lot like Secret Hitler.
Yeah, no, Secret Hitler is actually the closest comparison in that, you know, like Secret Hitler, when you're drawing policies and you're going to pick one, and then you might be like, oh, I drew 3 bad ones, guys, trust me. There's a lot of that in this game.
Okay.
Like, it's potentially lying about what you've been given or making the most of what you've been given and convincing the people at the table that you just did the best with what you had.
Okay, yeah. From what your description, it sounds like a more gamery version of Secret Hitler, but also you're saying it's like simple.
I think it's a simplification of Secret Hitler.
Okay.
Secret Hitler is like a Resistance variant, and anyone who says otherwise is lying, even the designers, so shots fired. This is built on a different foundation.
Yeah.
Where there's basically like 3 or 4 different win conditions for the bad guys and just one for the good guys, which is sort of like survive until the points are counted.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of different ways they can die. The shields can run out. The bad guys could catch up to them. So they're sort of trying to manage a variety of things happening bad to them.
Okay.
It doesn't feel like Secret Hitler to me. Secret Hitler feels very close to Resistance with different ways that you interact with the game state, whereas this has that same card draw system.
Yeah, that core card mechanic is certainly Secret Hitler.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's good. It's light. If you want a new social deduction game, I would definitely get this. I'd love to play it more. We haven't played it enough.
It's also pretty cheap. It's like, I think it's $15. The one thing that's a weird quirk, but it seems like it wants 4 or 6 players specifically. It can play 5, but then you're 2 versus 3, which feels a little bit weird. But yeah, that's Paris Exodus Nouveau. I also played a bunch of Werewords in the past week. I sort of also just picked that up on the cheap. And it's a game that I've sort of been wanting to pick up because I've loved Insider. And my gut take going into Werewords was that it didn't add anything substantial to Insider, but I feel like that might be changing. I actually do like the additions. I like the occasions where the mayor, in the person answering the questions, is occasionally a werewolf. I think is actually a pretty fun dynamic because sometimes even in a game where the mayor isn't a werewolf, people will accuse them of being a werewolf, and it's just a fun little extra layer on top of that. That seems good to me. Kellen's shaking his head furiously.
Well, I think we have to sort of explain the context to understand why you're so very, very wrong. Insider and Werewords share a common core. It is once again debatable about who made that common core, but that's a hour-long discussion. But essentially, it's 20 questions where someone knows the word, and they have to get you there to that word before the time runs out without being too obvious. If they're too obvious, they're going to lose. That's Insider. That's the game.
Yeah.
And it's borderline an activity than a game. And Werewords comes in and sort of adds, let's add every role that's existed in the werewolf universe, try to make this more gamery. I think that if you are a group of people who plays One Night Ultimate Werewolf, and the way you play that game is let's throw in every role ever from every expansion ever, and that's going to be fun, guys, then you will like Werewords over Insider.
I don't think that's fair. I think there is, and the most basic level, there's one more twist on Insider, which is that the mayor can be a werewolf. Okay, there's the seer as well. Okay, so let's say two more
One
twists.
more twist?
Sorry, two more twists. There are two slight little twists on
How
the
does the
Insider
end
format.
of game scoring work? Can you explain it? Because I actually don't think you can.
Damn you.
Huh.
Okay, so the way this works is...
Wait,
Well,
for Werewords?
Well, it's like if you get the... honestly, I would have to think about it for like a little bit before I could lay it out. Lay it out quickly.
Okay, if somebody guesses the... Oh, God.
I think the reality is Werewords has a fantastic app that has a cool word list that lets you sort of choose a different difficulty. Insider has a horrible word list. It's a cute oink game from Japan. Some of my salt or hatred is sort of born out of a love of oink games and what I believe is their idea being stolen. And I think that should be included. Stolen is a strong word,
right?
But it seems heavily influenced by, and sort of the origins of the game are sort of disputed.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So that's Werewords.
All right, so we're going to get into the questions we received, but before we do that, we're going to read a review. This review was on Facebook, is that correct?
Yes, Facebook.
Review from Facebook from Miles. Miles says, "These guys are awesome." Correct. That's parenthetical from me. And they know what good games are. In this podcast, there's no boring 20-minute discussion on inside jokes. Debatable. Debatable. You know those rants, not even about games that make no sense and aren't funny. Clearly, we are not under that category because we're always funny. There's no long discussion on whiskey or beer either. Sounds like shots fired. Nothing against whiskey or beer. I would love to have a drink and play a game with anyone, but this is a board game podcast. Damn right.
Yep.
These guys stay on topic. That's also...
Miles, you have no idea how hard it was reading this review and not saving it for next week and then interjecting with as many booze and beer and whiskey jokes as possible. Just completely derail an entire episode just for the joke of revealing it the next week. I wanted to do it so very badly, and then I realized I didn't have enough knowledge on the subject. I had started making a list of different brands. Anyway,
That's funny.
thank you for the very, very kind review on Facebook.
Well, there's more.
Oh, it's not over.
These guys stay on topic.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
As evidenced.
Kellen, Neelan, and Mark, the hosts. Interesting that I'm actually not the host, but this guy assumes I'm the host, probably because of my just charisma and
I saw that
leadership
it
qualities.
There was a typo, Mark,
No,
but by
I
all
think
means...
Miles is a great judge of character. Great judge of character. All have different tastes in games, which makes for some funny banter and insightful ideas on what games to buy. I give this podcast 5 stars. There are 3 exclamation points that follow that sentence. So you know he means it.
Right.
I assume that's a 5 out of 5 scale, or 5 out of 4.
Will be
scale.
embarrassing with 5 out of 10 at this point. Yeah, after that review.
So thank you so much, Miles. And we love reading these reviews. Love to see you review us on Facebook, as Miles did, or on Apple Podcast, or wherever you find us. It's great.
And we love reading them out as well. So
Yes.
please, if you do send one in, then we will likely read it out on the show.
Right.
So.
And you can refer to me as Mark, or the Green Tank, or the host.
It does concern me. Who do you guys think is in charge here?
Well,
Not
according
you
to
guys.
Miles, let's see.
That's a
So Mark
rhetorical
has
question for
Kellen,
the listeners.
writes Nealon, and
Stop
then Mark
talking.
writes Mark.
I
the
demand
host.
you stop talking.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these reader questions. We had, again, so many from last week that we decided to extend it to another episode. All right, so this first question is from Marshall. He asks, I'm new to the hobby, so I haven't really had a chance to play, quote-unquote, the classics. When starting a collection or playing games in general, do you recommend or think it's important to play the likes of Carcassonne, Catan, etc.?
I think I can jump into this one because I've played Catan once and
Okay.
Carcassonne never.
Okay.
So, no. No, genuinely. I think to some extent, in the extent that any discovering of history is important things, I
Right.
should probably have played those games. I mean, they're fundamental in, mechanically, I think, to a lot of games that have followed, I'm sure. But I don't really see that as a fundamental need.
I think, would agree with that. I think, especially when it comes to lighter games like Carcassonne or Catan, I don't think you really need to play them because there are a lot of other lightweight games or games that are refinements on those two games. I don't know if they stand alone as pinnacles of their weight or their mechanisms
Right.
that they're required playing. But I do think that there are classics that you should play, and you shouldn't assume that they've been bettered by newer games. And Kellen brings up El Grande a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's like one of the best examples of a game that is a classic that I think everybody should play. Because
Right.
It's a fantastic game.
And to be clear, of those two games specifically, the reason I haven't played them is because I've been told repeatedly, it's no, there are other games that have
Yeah.
done this better.
Yes.
Like you said, El Grande is a game that still comes up
Yeah.
as one of the pinnacles of its genre.
Yes.
So that's, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going back through my email to find Nealon's application to the podcast co-host, and you did not divulge that you
hadn't
never
played
played Carcassonne.
Right.
So
So we need to ceremonially
Revoke it.
unplug his mic.
So
Yeah.
get the fuck out. I'm of a couple minds here. I think it's gatekeeping, certainly, to tell anyone you have to play this or
You can't have an opinion unless you've played that.
yeah, but I do think that what makes our opinions relevant to board gaming is having a wide exposure to a lot of games that have been released over time. And so if you're looking to have an informed opinion in the hobby, it may be worth playing those games at least once. And I think Carcassonne, I've never understood why people enjoy that. So I think the examples you gave, like Catan and Carcassonne, have certainly been, in my opinion, replaced by other games. But I also think there's a danger, and other game reviewers sort of have this opinion, and Nealon and I argue about this, about, is the game design of the past 5 years just strictly superior to the game design of 10 or 15 or 20 years ago? And sort of there's this argument about the mechanics have been refined. We figured out how to do things. This is a classic thing that we talk about where video games have evolved graphically, have board games evolved mechanically? And I think the answer is yes, but I think there's a danger in just assuming that a game that comes out in 2018 is going to be better than Puerto Rico or Race for the Galaxy.
Right.
There are classics that are classic for a reason. And, it just depends on what you're looking for. If you're just looking to have a fun time, maybe you just want to play the new hotness and what you're interested in. But if you actually are looking to sort of widen and understand games at a deeper level, you might enjoy playing Carcassonne just to say, here's where I've played Isle of Skye, and this is clearly ripped off from Carcassonne.
Right.
And I think that that's an interesting perspective to perhaps have if you're into that.
I think what we all are sort of getting at, specifically in response to this question, is we would all say sort of sure, play them, but I don't think they're required
Yeah.
in any way
Of course.
as cornerstones of a good collection.
Certainly not from the perspective of buying them.
Yes,
I
right.
wouldn't go out and specifically seek out these games. If the opportunity presents itself to play them and
Yeah.
you could, in low stakes environment, try them.
Yeah,
sure.
but they're certainly not required. Again, toward the gatekeeping thing as well. I wouldn't say a collection is incomplete, certainly without these classics.
And actually, this is a good opportunity for me to, if you're in the Southern California area and you love Catan and sort of all the different like cities and knights and seafarers and throwing that all together, and you guys just love having that night, I'd love to be invited over to try that. I've actually only ever played base Catan and kind of enjoyed it, but I know there's a lot of love for that. And I'd love to come into an environment where that's sort of a revered and loved game to try to experience it at its best.
Interesting.
So I'm inviting myself over, you lovely listeners.
So we sort of ostracized Neelan for his lack of credentials in this topic. So I'm going to bring up a question that I think is more along Neelan's comfort zone. Hey guys, big fan of the show. I like that you have very different tastes, and I think that I'm somewhere in the middle, so I'm not ready to call a team just yet. Haha. Although I think after listening to this episode, you are certainly going to be Team Green. I also do like solo games, despite how much you joke about them. I think, just to be clear, Kellen is the one who jokes about them.
I'm deadly serious about
So
solo
I'd
games.
be interested in hearing which you've played and would recommend. Thanks. So, Neelan, take it away.
Yeah, as much as it gets joked about, I don't really play that many solo games. I've certainly played probably more than my two cohorts. Coffee Roaster is the one I'll come back to, is the one I've probably played the most. I haven't played it that recently, but I was playing it for a fairly long period of time because there is this score improvement aspect to it where you're just getting better and sort of recording your score and you see yourself improving. And I love that. Like when you can see yourself improving over a short period of time, that's the joy of solo games for me. Coffee Roaster is also really simple, and I can get through it in like 15 minutes, which is ideal. Other games I have done solo, which certainly do not fall in the 15-minute category, are Scythe. The Automa system for that is quite good. It's a little bit fiddly to get your head around, but once you're used to it, it's quite good. I've only done that a handful of times. A Feast for Odin I've done a couple of times, but both of these games are just too unwieldy to want to break out and feel like I want to devote 2-3 hours to. One Deck Dungeon is something I dabbled in, but not really to my tastes. It just was a bit too reliant on randomness. And to be clear, like I think one of the only ways you can separate a solo game is having a random element to them, because I mean otherwise it's purely deterministic and you'd probably be able to defeat it every single time. But One Deck Dungeon sort of veered a bit too hard in that direction. Teotihuacan, interestingly, has a solo mode.
Which was developed by the designer of Anachrony.
Yeah, of Anachrony and Kitchen Rush and a bunch of other games that I at least admire. I played this for about half an hour just as to teaching myself the rules. And it seems quite good. The Automa system is very, very simple. Like you go through their turns in like a couple of seconds, unlike something like Scythe where it feels like you're sort of fiddling with the rules to figure out exactly what they do. That's one I actually see myself going back to, despite how elaborate the setup for Teotihuacan is.
Why play with dummy players when all the players
all
would be
the
dummies?
players are dummy players, exactly.
But there's a danger there, right?
There is, and we've actually spoken about this idea about being that guy that goes home and practices Rock Band, and you're sort of like you're eliminating one of the social components of board games and elevating the game only for yourself and not growing as a group, as it were. And that's something I'm definitely conscious of. This is not something for big games that I like to do extensively for that exact reason. I like to try keep the playing field of the games I'm playing with as even as possible, with a couple of exceptions. Like Scythe is a game that I've played with certain groups just much more substantially, for example, than others. I think that's about it. Those are the good ones I can think of. I'm probably missing some.
Onirim.
I don't love it.
I love it.
I like it in app form because you don't have to do all that shuffling.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful game. Yeah.
And I've played Friedman Freese's Friday, which is good. I liked it.
You don't like Onirim?
I liked it. I'd never had the actual physical version, and the app version was fun for a few days. And
How many times did you play it?
I probably played it a lot. 20 times, let's say.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but
What how many times have you played through the ages? How many times have you played through the ages, Neelan? Less.
I don't think
Onirim.
I would have played it that many times if I had to shuffle all those cards every time.
What is the logical fallacy where he's just saying something that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about? My argument was based on play count, and then you said I wouldn't have done it if I had to shuffle cards.
Yeah, that's valid.
No, it was irrelevant. You played it 20 times. It's fine.
But
Yeah,
but through the ages.
What game holds up to 20 plays?
I've probably played Through the Ages 20 times.
Liar.
That's true. Absolutely true if you count the digital version of it. which is only true of Onirim. Boom!
He thinks I got, but
You got.
real listeners know. Speaking of getting got, a listener wrote in to help me get Mark. So it is time for a hot trivia question. Neelan,
Hot trivia. That doesn't work.
do it.
That works. Do
Okay,
it.
hot trivia question.
That was a really good one. I like
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
So,
Well, first of all, I just want to state for the record that if you don't think that I'm going to edit this so I get the trivia question right, you're sadly mistaken. But go ahead and ask me this trivia question.
one Dr. Finn
Who I'm friends with on Facebook.
had a game called Biblios.
Are you familiar with this game, Mark?
But before that game was known as Biblios, it was released as this name.
Scripts and Scribes. Come on. Come on.
Wrong.
Scribes and Scripts?
Scriptorium.
What? Was it really?
I actually don't know. This is what the person emailed me, but hopefully that's right.
Definitely true. And Mark is
Scriptorium.
definitely wrong.
Wait, hold on.
No,
I
Stop
got
saying it. We're
you're
not
not-
going to let you
you're
say
not
Okay,
getting
Scriptorium.
all right, all right,
Clean
all
edit
right.
of
Okay,
Scriptorium.
okay. Scriptorium. So our next question comes from Doctor, speaking of doctors, Dr. Paul.
Are they now telling us if they're doctors?
Yeah.
I like
What
this.
is it? A real doctor?
You know what? I feel like our listeners should be doctors. That should be like
Just-
their thing.
I don't.
That's our
I
community.
like it.
The
I like
doctors.
They're
it.
all
the
doctors no
Yeah.
matter what?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Just
I
like
think
Dr. Finn.
we grant a doctorate in board games by just by
Uh-huh.
listening to us. You see? It all makes sense. You just have to think outside the box, Kellen. Anyway, so this comes from Dr. Paul, who may or may not be a real doctor. And he says, this is a long one, so bear with me. Something I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on are, and this is not taking aim at your podcast, that's what Dr. Paul says, so we're ready for this shot. Some YouTube videos, podcasts, articles, doing reviews on board games after playing the game only once or only part of a game. When I research a game to buy it, it can be annoying that I'm making a decision based on someone's first impressions. They comment on balance, replayability, etc. I find it takes a while to develop strategies and really see what a game has to offer after multiple plays. I understand if you don't like a game on the first play, then you may not give it another shot, but I think it would be good to see some reviews based on a game that has been out a while and someone who has played it a lot and understands its ins and outs. What are your thoughts on reviews for games being done after just one or less plays? Do you watch reviews before buying games? Is this affecting the sales of games with depth and thus curbing board game designers for future games? So there's a lot to that from the doctor. But he's a doctor for a reason, so you would expect nothing less than a fully fledged out
This is
question.
secretly just taken from his thesis.
Right, exactly. So the questions are, what are your thoughts on reviews for games that are played just once, or I guess even less, but that would be difficult to believe happens often. Do you watch reviews before buying games, and is this affecting sales of games and designs of games? So I think this is obviously, is illustrated by the length of the question. It's sort of a complicated topic or question to answer. I think ideally you'd want game reviewers to have played games multiple times, because you want, if they're going to be talking about replayability and if it has bang for your buck, you want them to have played it multiple times in order to have a real understanding of that game offers that. But I think it's clear that the market, reviewers are heavily incentivized to get reviews out for games as soon as they can, or their content is going to be lost. If you're not the first person, if you don't get a review of a hot game out quickly, you're going to be lost in the shuffle. So I can understand the inclination for reviews to get out, to be made quickly and to get out quickly, because I think this is typical in any review format, being video games or movies or books or whatever. There's a strong incentivization to release your reviews quickly.
Fast,
so it's understandable. It's not ideal, but it's understandable.
Board games are sort of a very weird, specific industry in that, any other medium, you can watch a film once, you can read a book once, you can finish most video games. That's not true of every video game, but you can play a story video game once. But a board game, there is this indefinite amount of times that you are, quote unquote, required to play it before you're allowed to have an opinion. And this is something, honestly, this is something we talk about a lot and is hyper-specific to specific outlets. This is certainly not something that we would cast aspersions on any other outlet for the way they do things.
Right.
But we also don't claim to be doing, at least as far as ours concerns us, quote-unquote, reviews of games all that often, especially not on the podcast. I think there is certainly value in hearing someone's impressions, regardless of how many times they've played a game. I think we make an effort to say when we've played a game X number of times and whether our opinion is likely to change or whether it has changed over time. And I think like that's something that's specific to what we're trying to provide. This was our initial take. This is where we come back on it like a week down the line and so on. And to me, that feels like a pretty genuine response to the way that we just play and talk about games.
Yeah. I mean, the whole question of whether replayability is actually an important thing is, to me, and the word I'm going to use is sadly, like, is that even important? Is replayability even important with the breakneck pace of the way games are released and played? It seems like, and I know this is certainly not the case for everybody, and perhaps not even the case for most, but I think a lot of people who are enthusiasts in the hobby are interested in the latest game. You know, games wouldn't be being released at such a, again, breakneck pace if there wasn't a market for them. So people are buying all these games. So how many times are they actually being played? Again, I honestly think, you know, there's nothing wrong with playing, you know, the latest, hottest game and not feeling inclined to necessarily play again, even if you like it. That's fine. But, you know, for me, I think ideally I'd like to play a game multiple times, but I don't know if that's really an actual thing that a game needs to have in the way the market is now and the way that people are sort of seem to be playing games, or if that's an aspiration that we have.
Right.
We want to believe we're going to play these games a lot of times. And certainly I think games should be built in a way that they will stand up to multiple plays. I think we all can agree on that. But is that actually important? I don't know. I don't even know if that's...
I think that if your goal is to have a 50-game collection of only the best and most replayable and best games, you'd be better off setting a year timer. A game comes out and you should wait an entire calendar year before making a decision on whether to purchase that. I think, like Mark mentioned, you're heavily incentivized to sort of release your opinion on something ahead of time so as to either help or bolster the success of a game.
Or not even from the perspective of the game, but from the perspective of providing a valuable, relevant, timely service to the audience. Like, just from that perspective, like, the timing means a lot.
I think there is also, when you mention replayability, a lot of our viewers talk about perceived replayability. You know, there's elements that you can look at Teotihuacan and see all the variability in how it's set up. So you know that replayability exists. At least you know that there's going to need to be changes to the way that you do your strategy. So a lot of times they may be speaking more from that perspective than actually saying this game truly has replayability and I've played it 50 times.
Yeah.
But I think this is sort of why I'm obsessed with the idea of these games that slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm scouring Board Game Geek looking for them because I kind of believe that maybe the best game of 2017, you know, is one that only 1,000 people have played.
Right. And I don't know if you said the whole timer, put a 1-year timer in jest, but I think that's actually a great piece of advice. We get swept up in like the latest, hottest game, and you sort of envision it as like the ultimate game. Like the game that everybody's talking about, it suddenly like starts feeling like some like incredible ultimate game that when it's released is going to like take the world by storm. But if you sit back and just think about the game that occupied that space a year ago, it may not even be on anybody's radar anymore.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot to be said for just like, sure, go out and try to play that game if you're really interested in it. And if there's a lot of buzz about it, sure, go ahead and play it. But maybe don't commit yourself to buying it until it's, you know, had a chance to stretch its legs and, you know, be played by a number of people and then see if it has staying power. I mean, you know, there are games like Azul, which seem like they do have the staying power. It seems pretty clear that that's a game that's going to be, you know, some level of longevity there. But there's a ton of games that were very, very hot and have completely fizzled, you know.
And certainly that requires a lot of willpower on your part as the audience that sort of is hearing about these games constantly. But see that as our hit to you. Like, we're required to be on these new games to some extent.
Right.
To best serve you so that you have an informed opinion down the line.
Yeah, maybe take reviewers as maybe the first step. Like, is this a game that I should play, you know, before necessarily diving in? I mean, you know, of course, if there's a reviewer that you think matches your likes or you're interested in games, I would suggest myself as that reviewer. Then maybe you're more inclined to trust them for a purchase. But even then, I would say there's no rush. You know, if you care about a game's replayability, then you shouldn't necessarily probably be in a rush to buy it immediately. You know?
Right. I mean, something that you always say, Mark, is that when we talk about Kickstarters and pre-orders, I mean, those games will still be available to purchase in some form a year from now.
Right. And usually for a deep discount. So,
yeah.
I mean, you'll save yourself a lot of money if you're just willing to wait even like a couple months, really. Right. Yeah. Dr. Paul's other question was, do you watch reviews before buying games?
This is an interesting one coming out of our hot take on Keyforge, which is a game that is getting a lot of praise. You can play a lot of games of this quickly, so I have no doubt that other reviewers have played it a lot, but our initial reaction was fairly negative.
Yeah.
And almost everywhere else you're seeing sort of universal positivity. So that makes you go, maybe I missed something.
Right.
And makes you sort of pause. And so I think there's a danger as a reviewer or a critic or whatever you want to call it in sort of parroting opinions from other entities. I think Fantasy Flight has their other procedural game, Discover Lands Unknown, which is just getting trashed sort of universally.
Yeah.
And to the point that I still want to try it, but my enthusiasm or putting that on top of the pile has lessened because it does not seem to be a good game. But I've tried to be very careful about not sort of parroting the opinion that it's bad, because I don't know that. But I'm fairly active on Reddit, on the board game subreddit, as we all are. But I try not to sort of parrot an opinion that I actually don't have.
To Kellen's point, a game that I think sort of hit that weird spot is Cry Havoc. I know, for example, I think Tom Vassell was a huge proponent of it, made it go from an obscure game to a game that everybody instantly wanted, and then seemed to be very well reviewed initially. There was like this huge push for the game. And then I feel like once it got onto the market, after being played by people, started fading quite quickly. And it just struck me as really interesting that it went from a game that was like universally praised to then, I feel like, I don't know if critics necessarily like then panned it, but it went from a game that was praised anywhere I looked to a game where everybody sort of acknowledged like, oh, it's actually maybe not so great and maybe has some serious flaws. So it's just another warning sign to let a game breathe before necessarily jumping in.
But I think we all have different systems to find new games, and that's what sort of keeps our ecosystem going.
Yeah.
We're all looking for games in sort of different places. And in some cases, that's reading early reviews or impressions from sort of trusted sources. But a lot of times it's following designers that we really, really like, or publishers that we feel like have hit on to sort of a good streak, or we see a piece of art that intrigues us. And so there's a bunch of different ways that I personally find new games to be interested in. But like we've talked about, is being on that bleeding edge valuable as sort of a normal board game customer?
Right.
Maybe it's not.
Next question comes from Luis. Luis says, the Gen Con weekend were some of my favorite episodes. Are you planning on doing that every year? What about it for other conventions? Please come to Origins. I will say that I've never been to Origins, although it takes place in Columbus, is where I went to school, and go Bucks. Big win against Michigan. Sorry, I had to mention that.
I've been to Origins. It's great. I think we definitely want to do more of these live recordings. I think one of our goals is conceivably to do a live recording at Gen Con this upcoming year. Don't know how we're going to swing that, but with your help, I'm sure we can make it happen. Maybe we'll just like show up and somehow like take shut up and sit downs, like trap them in their hotel room and then just sort of come out.
Take their stuff, yeah.
I'm not sure what character we'll all play, but I'll probably have a starring role.
Yeah, but I think our plan is certainly to go to Gen Con. I don't know if we've talked about necessarily any other cons.
I think we've joked about Essen, but I mean, I would love that.
Yeah, that'd be great. That would be great. And there's always Barrage Con.
Yeah, the most important
convention.
convention.
Invite only.
Yeah.
Going to be our third annual coming up this year. So yeah, that's where we stand on that.
Yeah, but certainly at least if we're attending a convention, we would do, I think, at least sort of an episodic release for the day. Like, I think we all enjoy doing those daily recordings at Gen Con and would love to do them more.
Yeah, and
it made us delirious.
Right. And wherever we go, there will definitely be a Between the Sheets episode, and we will definitely have Freezer Pants.
Freezer Pants forever.
Freezer Pants forever. Next question from Cynthia. What do you guys do when you're trying to pick a game for game night and can't come to an agreement? I know this is a
big topic,
Yeah,
and the makings of a full episode, perhaps someday. I think, and this is my broad strokes opinion, I think that playing the game of allowing everyone to veto everything possible allows you to play none of the good games and all of the most generic Carcassonne ripoffs. Essentially, if you go in and say, well, I don't like that, and then Neelan says, I don't like this, and Mark says, I don't like that, you are left with nothing good, and you will play Azul every game night for the rest of forever. Congratulations.
Nothing wrong with Azul, to
Yeah.
be clear. I get what you're saying. It's like
Right.
palatable to most people, and you don't get to play the highs and lows.
I think it's a hard problem when you're when you're factoring in like any sort of social dynamic, obviously. But like, I think something that we talk about gravitating more towards is prominently saying, "Hey, I really wanted
Yeah.
to do this game. Who wants to do this with me?"
Yeah.
That way, you get people that are excited to play a specific game.
And you get to play the games that you want to play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not always going to be possible. You can't be the guy that shouts out at the beginning of the game night, "Hey, this is what I'm playing," every single time. But certainly, I think building that sort of environment feels desirable to me. I don't know.
I think there's nothing but good to be gained from doing that.
Player count is obviously one of the biggest
Hardest
challenges.
things, yeah.
Who's showing up to game night? Do you have a group of just 4 people? Because if we had a group of just 4 people that gamed together once a week, I think I would make it even more orderly and sort of allow some. And I don't want to get too formulaic, but maybe a system where everyone is choosing one in a row. So one Saturday night you'd play 2 games, and then the next Saturday, and you'd even maybe know what was coming up. Like, what are you most excited about getting to the table? What are you most? And then I know a lot of game groups have systems where if you win a game or if you keep losing a game, you get more points to, allow you to impact the next game chosen.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good way to play games outside your comfort zone. But if you have a group of, 10 to 15 people and you never know who's going to show up, it's very, very difficult to figure this problem out. I think it's one of the hardest problems of having a game night.
And one of our groups has that dynamic where we're not sure who's going to show up. And, honestly, what I've taken to recently is just saying, like, okay, what games are vetoed? Which games are, like, people will definitely not play? And then just making a decision.
Yeah.
Like, just step up and make a decision. And honestly, you may feel like you're being, like, aggressive or you may be, like, stepping out of line. But honestly, you're relieving, like, a bit of tension that everybody's sort of going through. So just pick a game. If nobody else can make a decision or everybody's sort of hesitant, just step up and pick a game. And either you'll play it or you'll pick something else. But I just think making a decision and getting to a game is a good piece of advice.
Yeah, and the hope would be that anyone that was vehemently against that would say something at that
Right.
point and not just be arbitrary. "Oh, I'd rather do this."
Right,
than that." Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and so our last question comes from Facebook again. This comes from Jonathan. He asks, will you guys be doing game reviews on YouTube? So, funny you should mention that, Jonathan. We are considering different possibilities as far as YouTube is concerned, but one thing that we aren't considering because we're actually going to be doing is releasing our top 50 games. This is going to be our 50 for 50. Top 50 games is in commemoration of our 50th episode coming up. So over the next couple weeks, we are going to be releasing both on YouTube and the podcasts our top 50 games
Of all time.
Of all time. These are the 50 games. Well, mine will be the 50 games, and theirs will be like 50-ish. Like
Some other 50 games.
Some other 50 games.
Yeah.
But
How are we doing crossover?
We'll just do it.
We just do it.
Yeah.
There's no way we're going to fix crossover, I would think.
So yes, they'll be broken up into 10 game increments. So over the next 5 weeks, you'll be hearing our top 50 games. I know a lot of people have asked for them, and you will get what you asked for.
Ask and ye shall receive.
That's right. So we're excited about that. We're really excited about that, and I think it's going to be really fun to do to make the lists and to give recording videos a shot.
Hopefully you won't be in your gym clothes.
We're going to dress up in suits.
That's right. This is formal.
I cannot promise we will dress up in suits.
I have a red suit.
Ooh, I need to get an orange suit.
Red tank, boys.
So that is going to do it for our show. As always, you can send us more questions again through Facebook, through our email, boardgamebarrage@gmail.com.
I mean, this is the podcast now. We just answer questions for
That's
forever,
right. Exactly.
so-
Dance, monkey. But I think the goal is, right, to sort of have a regular mailbag segment.
Yeah.
I mean,
so-
genuinely, I wish we had
Yeah.
done this sooner. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
intimately, yeah.
As always, you can find us through any number of social media venues. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. We're all active, as Kellen mentioned, on Reddit, so we're there as well. Of course, visit the website, boardgamebarrage.com, and our guild, boardgamebarrage.com/guild, where there's a lot of interesting, in-depth discussion.
That's a /. Neelan always likes to let you know that there's a / guild.
So it's a /. Please do not do a backslash, or God knows what
You
will happen.
never know what part of the internet you'll end up in.
And finally, as always, a big thank you to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid? You can find them at heartsocietymusic.com. So, before our big YouTube Top 50 debut, we're going to be signing off, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's like upgrading to like color or something.
That's right. Going from black and white to color. Technicolor.
Bye.
I'm high. I'm ready. I want you to save me from myself.
That is a funny.
Oh, no problem. Was there something else you wanted to...
I always want to talk to you, Mark.
Okay, great. I wish the feeling was mutual.